Hi, Martin here, the AKM project guy. Welcome back for part 7 of the King Tut build. In this episode, we're going to be working on the beading that adorns the breastplate of the sculpture. And we're also going to see if we can finish up the base as well. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so as we take a look at these beads, a couple of things I notice here. Number one is that they're not all the uniform in length. And so, like, for example, if you look at this one here versus the ones down here, they are much longer. And for me, the nuances and the lengths are just too much for me to try and match. So what I'm going to do is just average them all out. And we'll just come up with a standard length for the beads, and we'll use that for all of the beading, especially coming down in this location. Now these that go around here, we might make adjustments if necessary. But for this portion here, we're just going to be uniform. So this line here represents the very bottom division that's going to run across here. And that's important because for all this beading to work, this has to be right here. So this is a must that there's a divider that runs right here in order for all these other beads to align right and look right. And so since I have the bottom of my first division up here, all I did is counted the number of dividers, and there was 7. And I added up their width, and then I added that distance right here to this mark here. So this represents the total number of divisions will take up this much space. And this line represents the top of that last divider. And so all I did was counted the number of divisions of rows of beads that we have, which came to 8. And I divided that into this distance from here down to here. And the average was 11.25. So we're just going to round it to 11, and we're going to make beads that are 11 millimeters in length. And I cut out this little wafer here, and I will have to just place the beads in their appropriate slot. And once that's done, then we'll come back and place it up in there. I will cut it at the bottom at that time, and then we'll add another division underneath it, and we'll just continue that all the way down. Okay, so for the sake of time, I sped this up a bit, but basically I decided to lay out my bands and dividers ahead of time before adding the beading to it. And that's what I'm doing here. I wanted the dividers to recess into the foam, and so I basically cut down vertically, and then I removed the extra material with tweezers. Once I had everything trimmed up and in place, I did a quick test to make sure everything looked right before I started applying the beads. When it came to applying the beads, the system that I came up with was to lightly tack the strip down, as you see here, and then apply the beads. Now they were oversized just for ease of handling. And then once I had them glued down, I can go back and adjust the spacing to keep the array appearance. After that, I removed them, trimmed off the extra, and then I was ready to place it into the sculpture. For the remainder of the beading, I went ahead and glued them down directly onto the sculpture, as you can see here. And this is a little bit of that process. I had to find a way to cut down the time, and so I came up with a system where I can make multiple strands of beading so that there was maybe 5 to 6 beads that I can put down at one time. And so this process required me to sand these individual strips down and to keep the roundness of the top side of the bead intact. And once I had them all sanded down in shape, I glued them together. The trick about doing this is that obviously the curved end you had to have flat so that the beads would have the appearance of the same height. And so I had to apply pressure to keep it flat on the surface of the table as I glued them together. The next step was to trim the segment down to the proper height, and that's what I'm doing here. Once I had it trimmed down so that it matched the other beading, I just came across it with a perpendicular cut to the 11 millimeter height. And when it came to gluing, I used rubber cement. I put glue on both sides, and I used that divider, the paper, to divide them until I had it in place just to where I wanted it. And then I was able to go back and make minor adjustments. And here's how that turned out. Okay, so when it came to the final row, it was a bit more challenging for me because it has a very intricate design on it. And so what I decided to do was still work in segments. And I just went ahead and drew the design, the pattern out on that particular segment. And once I had it to the way that I wanted, I etched it in, I guess, or burned it in lightly using my adjustable soldering iron gun thing. But I made this special tip here from one of my tips that I had. And then I just went over it to where it was not hot enough to burn the foam, but just enough to where it left a nice impression, and I was able to get the detail that I desired. The next step was to trim it down to the 11 millimeter length. And once I did that, I had to put a slight curvature in it here so that it wouldn't be so difficult to glue down. And after applying glue to both sides, I was able to glue it down. Of course, I had to keep it divided again until I had it lined up. But once I had it lined up, I was able to go ahead and put it down and make any final adjustments that I needed to make. When I finally had it all done, I was able to go back and trim off that extended piece that I left on from earlier. When it came to finishing the base of the sculpture, I had to add this trim piece that runs around the edge of the sculpture. I did chamfer it a bit just where it met up with the sculpture. And as you can see here, it's a little oversized, it's a little thick. And I will trim that down later once I free it from the stand. But this edging also extended around the front side. So I had to apply that there, and also the very bottom of the sculpture. And to put this edging on, I used a little extra glue because I wanted the seam where it met up with the sculpture to fit together snugly. Once I did that, I just went back and did a little trimming and a little sanding to get it to look right. And this is how it turned out. So I think this is a good place to end for this particular video. So I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you'll be back for part 8. Thank you.